and how they fit with the integrated plan. So TFO, First Nations, various users, who has responsibilities in an area, and how that will be done in the management plan. The other thing that we're trying to do is create an institutional arrangement that endures, that continues, so that there's a forum and a place to talk about issues. So not just the creation of a plan, but an ongoing governance structure to allow those conversations to continue. And also an implementation strategy. So once we come up with an integrated plan, management plan, how are we actually going to effect it? Okay, so last year, almost exactly at this time, there was a forum in Richmond, a big forum, 300 people came, and we talked about the engagement strategy at that point, and talked about PNCIMA more generally. There's a new website. I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at it, but if not, I encourage you to do so, because it's very informative. There's a paper that was discussed at the forum, which was asked for at that forum, and is released and is on the website. There's been a number of follow-up meetings with interested parties throughout the summer, talking about various aspects, particularly of the governance approach and of the engagement strategy. This thing we call SOCOA, because it's a long acronym, but Socioeconomic and Cultural Overview Assessment Report, has started, and that's the results of a workshop that was held up in Prince Rupert just in February. And a draft engagement strategy, process overview, and context documents, which you have before you. And so to answer the question, you know what we've done, but where are we going with this plan? We do have an ambitious plan. For this year, what we want to do is develop a work plan with the resourcing plan attached to it, complete the stakeholder engagement strategy, develop terms of reference for the planning process, develop a definition for ecosystem-based management, and have another forum. For 211, the plan is to develop ecological and socioeconomic objectives and indicators, and identify strategies and management measures for achieving those objectives. And then finally, in 212, what we would like to see is that we have completed a draft plan, which would be intended for submission to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. So it is ambitious, and I think that as we talk about the engagement strategy and the various elements of how we engage people and work with them, it would be useful, I think, to keep in mind that the approaches that we develop, I think, are somewhat dependent on the time frame that we have. And our view was that a shorter time frame was probably better, because it keeps people engaged, it doesn't drag on forever and ever. It keeps, I think, the energy and the resource level kind of within reasonable levels. But what it also means is we need to have a tighter process that still allows for a lot of engagement, but that also allows for the work to continue. And so Neil's going to talk to you in more detail about that, but I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think.
That's great.
So if I'll stop, and if there's questions, I can answer them, and then Neil will get into the details.
Yeah, Bruce, did you want to add anything?
No,
Sorry, Bruce.
that's it in a nutshell, and let's see if there's any questions.
Okay, so anybody have any questions sort of on the general nature? And if you think of something, we'll have time at the end as well to ask sort of more general questions. But if you have anything right now about what Rebecca's just presented, then we can go ahead.
Let's go back a couple slides.
Please.
That's two. Is that what you
That's the one. Thanks. The third point there, marine spatial plans. You mentioned when you were speaking that it might result in more than one at different scales. Could you expand on?
Well, I think that I don't know how much thinking we've done on what exactly the marine spatial plan would look like, but within the LOMA, the Large Ocean Management Area, you can have a LOMA level kind of plan, but then at some point you need to break down to a smaller scale, so geographical area, coastal management areas. And so I would envision down the road various scales of planning to carry on, and I think that's what's intended there.
Okay, any other, go ahead.
I'd just like to mention that Local Land Plan is in the process of developing their management plan within our area. And we'll be coming back and looking at your plan and try and have them parallel working. So that's the route we're going in our community, developing our own management plan for our community members. And hopefully it will coincide with what you guys are coming up with.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think that's useful because First Nations are developing their own plans, as some of you are aware. And so that does need to be, the PNCIMA plan hopefully is the overarching plan, but other ones need to be consistent and mesh together so that we have, plans, overarching objectives nested within, so it all fits together.
Okay,
Rebecca, just on that, are all First Nation communities developing plans? Or it's just certain ones?
Bruce can probably speak to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't stand up and say all First Nations are doing it. I know that on the North Coast, you've heard Victor say that they're just starting along the route of developing some sort of plan. But the ones that have been active in the last several years are Metlakatla, Kitkatla, Hartley Bay, Kidmat Village, Kitsinkalem on the North Coast. Central Coast, there's 4 First Nations, Kitasoo, Balakula, Balabella, and Owikino. There's the 2 on Haida Gwaii that are doing one plan for Haida Gwaii. And I think that there's several bands on the north end of Vancouver Island, around the Fort Hardy, Fort McNeil area, that are a little farther down the road than what Victor had just mentioned. So several of those bands at the lower end of PNCIMA are I guess, just in current discussions of how to engage, but I think their intent is to engage in some. So it's the majority of them, the Niska, we haven't figured out what their interests might be. And then some of the bands on the lower end of the map around Fort Hardy in that area, we're still not quite sure about, but it has the majority of First Nations.
okay, let's jump into Neil's presentation. This will be the last presentation, so you're not going to get a whole bunch of presentations tonight. And then we can get into the discussion of the engagement mechanism.
Are you going to do the slide answer? You don't have to be.
No, I'd like to be. It gives
Okay.
me meaning in my life.
Okay, so actually before I get started, I actually have a question on a totally different topic. Looking around the room here, I'm wondering, I think that almost all of you should be on a list thread that we send communications out to. And in speaking with Jason, he was mentioning that he didn't get an email sent to him about this meeting.
We got it a while ago, and then something else in this term, and now we're not getting it anymore.
So are others having the same experience? Okay, so this is news to us, but certainly something we'll look into, because this is an important way that we want to be communicating with you, and if it's not working, then we need to fix it. So, good to know. Now, the engagement strategy. So on your tables you have a copy of this, and it is explicitly a draft document. And as Alex has outlined, what we're here to do is really invite your thoughts about our proposal for how to engage with you in this planning process as interested individuals and parties. This document is actually one of 3 that looks like this, which is a little bit confusing, and we apologize for that. There's 2 others that have the same design. They're available on the back table that will provide you a little bit more in terms of background about the planning process and a little bit about sort of the